This day and age where porn star payments are almost passé, and it seems there's a new lawsuit against the president every week, watching too much TV can make you think the world is going to hell in a handbasket.
Tonight, President Trump dramatically escalates trade war fear, sending stocks into another steep dive.
President Trump tears up the Iran nuclear deal. Tonight, Iran's new warning already.
The FBI director told Congress he is investigating whether the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to sway the election.
The White House is neither being truthful nor transparent with the country.
As we're drowning in talk of torture, nuclear war, and constitutional crises, my next guest goes against the grain, arguing with a ton of data that we're actually making progress on virtually every front, as we're healthier, wealthier, and living longer than ever. The book is called Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress. The author, Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker, joined me to talk about it. Steve, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. To paraphrase an old saying, if it weren't for bad news, there wouldn't be no news at all. For those of us who say that, you think we're looking in all the wrong places, don't you?
Right. Well, news is going to cover what goes wrong, and there will always be things that go wrong, but it doesn't cover what goes right because it's often quite boring.
So what goes right? Where's
a country that isn't having a famine, a country that isn't having a war, a city that isn't shot up by terrorists. It's just not news.
But it's not just the absence of bad news. You think there's a ton of progress, a ton of good news as well.
There is progress that you can find if you look at global data, if you look at the percentage of kids that are going to school, if you look at the percentage of girls that are going to school, if you look at rates of homicide, if you look at rates of death in warfare, if you look at rates of extreme poverty, all of them are going in the right direction.
And by the way, your graphs, as I said to you when I met you recently, I hate graphs. They're seductive in ways that are almost indescribable. They're fabulous. But so where's the disconnect? Because I'm assuming most people watching are shaking their head like this and saying, my life is crummy. I can't afford to go on vacation. I can't afford to send my kids to college. What's he talking about? So where's the disconnect?
Well, part of the disconnect is that people actually say that less than you think. People
really?
Often, there's a phenomenon in polling called the optimism gap, where people often, if you ask them, how good are your kids' schools? And they say, oh, they're pretty good. And then you ask them, how good are the country schools? Oh, they're terrible. The kids aren't learning a thing. How safe is your neighborhood? Oh, it's pretty safe. How safe are your city's neighborhoods? Oh, it's a jungle out there. You can't walk down the street without getting shot. So there's always a discrepancy on almost anything that you ask between people's opinion of their own lives and their opinions of the country and the world.
Love my congressman, hate the other 434, same sort of thing. But exactly. The media doesn't help because, as you said, we do focus. I'm trying to think when I knew you were coming, what's the last time we focused on the lowering of the poverty rate? Or we just don't, except in the inside pages.
That's right. As one economist put it, the papers could have run the headline, 138,000 people escaped from extreme poverty yesterday, every day for the last 30 years. But they never ran that headline, and as a result, 1 billion people have escaped from extreme poverty, and no one knows about it. Not only do they not know about it, but people have an impression of the way the world is going that's complete opposite to reality. If you ask people, is the number of people in extreme poverty increasing, decreasing, or staying the same? 95% say it's staying the same or increasing, and the reality is it's decreasing by a lot.
How ephemeral is the progress? You're not a big Trump fan. I mean, does he have the ability to, well, I know it's an understatement, does he have the ability to undo much of what you celebrate in the pages of your book?
Well, it's too soon to tell because there are a lot of forces that have led to progress, and he's certainly pushing in the wrong direction in a number of ways. International agreements have done a lot to bring down the rate of death in warfare. There's a kind of a community of nations. There's no world government, but there's kind of an understanding that you don't invade other countries at the drop of a hat. Unlike most of human history, where war was the continuation of policy by other means.
Well, he's an anti-interventionist, even though he has sometimes violated his... But, you know, the two things that I think in your book you say are still not on the page of those that were solved, are the two things where he's made the most dramatic action on climate change and on nuclear armament.
Yes,
so at least in those two critical areas, he could have a dramatic impact on what you think is necessary in the direction in which this world is going, no?
Yes, that is right. So those are areas to fear because he is pushing the world in the wrong direction. Whether one man can actually change the course of history, we'll find out.
You know, if you say people think things are better than I think they are, then that totally blows away the story as to why Donald Trump is president of the United States. The conventional wisdom, which we all espoused after November 8th, or most of us did, is, oh, well, we missed this whole thing. People are miserable. He understood their misery, even if he really couldn't fix it, we say. And as a result, they said, hey, at least this guy's speaking to me. Mm-hmm. But that's belied by your notion that people don't think things are so bad. So how do you...
They do think they're bad. They may not think their own lives are bad, but they think the country's going in the wrong direction.
Isn't it? But don't they vote based on their own lives? Don't?
People often vote based on their theory of which way the country is going. Because when you think about it, I mean, I know this is kind of violates principles of democracy, but your vote really isn't going to turn the election. Your vote is not going to affect your own personal situation.
Unless you live
one
in
way
Florida, actually.
Well, that's true.
That's right. Okay. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Which means for most people, a vote is kind of a symbolic expression of their values, their theories, their opinions. It's not so much how it's going to change their lives, because it's not going to change their lives.
Does progress or belief in progress beget more progress? I mean, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does it?
I tend to think that it does. There's an optimal amount of pessimism. You've got to know that there are enough things going wrong with the world that you want to fix them, but not be so fatalistic that you think that efforts to improve the world are a waste of time, or to slip into radicalism, to think that our institutions are so hopeless, so beyond reform, that we may as well burn them to the ground because anything that rises out of the ashes is bound to be better. We know that can lead to disaster.
So what is Enlightenment? Enlightenment Now, what does that have to do with where we are in 2018?
Well, I wanted a rubric to cover values of reason and science and humanism and ultimately progress. And I kind of dated them to the Enlightenment of the second half of the 18th century, including the American founders and framers. Mm-hmm. But the idea that by using reason and sympathy for our fellow humans, we can make progress. We can figure out how the world works. We can implement institutions and reforms that make things better a bit at a time.
Okay, so when I was in law school at NYU, I was taught, as old young lawyers to be, never ask a question to which you don't know the answer. I know the answer to this question, so I can ask it. When Bill Gates, talk about endorsements, says this is his new favorite book of all time, he said about this, what is his old favorite book of all time, Steve Pinker?
The Better Angels of Our Nature.
Who wrote that?
Why Violence Has Declined by Stephen Pinker.
Stephen Pinker. Good for you. Steve, congratulations. It's a great book. It's really worth it.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
The book again, Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress. It's currently number 6 on the New York Times bestseller list. I highly recommend it as a break from all the bad news out there.